I know several times I have written some code and my colleagues will look at it and it's like, okay, what does this do? And I'm like, I read about it, and just explaining to them, they see that this is possible and then they use it. So the same way, reading the book would just give you that insight on what is actually possible, and then it actually help a lot.
Yeah, that's always the goal, to open up the vistas
Yeah.
of what's possible.
CSS is emotional. This phrase came to me randomly one afternoon when I was trying to explain CSS to someone at the office. And it was very unexpected. It just hit me like a truth that has been there always, waiting for someone to say it. And what was an explanation of styles and selectors immediately became something more. It became a realization that CSS is more than just code. That CSS is about expression, is about nuances, and CSS is very personal. Months later, in November of 2024, that moment became a seed that grew into a blog series where I explored the depth and, of course, the emotions behind CSS. Then something happened. Around that time, CSS got a new logo, and with the new logo came a color that was tied to a story that's so deeply human that it sent chills down my spine. So I reached out to Eric Meyer, who is one of the founding fathers of CSS and actually very central to this story. What followed was a conversation I would never forget in my life. This video is a piece of that moment, and it is emotional, it is educational, it is inspirational, and I promise you, after seeing this video, you will never look at CSS the same way again. We've already started, talking about the CSS specifications already, right? And I was just thinking, there's this book on which is written. We read the specifications, so you don't have to. I don't know if that sounds familiar. Oh, okay.
Yep, it's right here. It's
Yeah.
the book that you can use for home defense, because it's huge. But yeah.
So I mean, I think I want to talk about this for some time.
Okay.
Like this obviously shows your interest in this, right? Because it's one thing to be someone who has helped shape how CSS is today, and it's another thing to be so interested in it that you try to still find a way to simplify this for other people who don't necessarily understand the history, right? But need to understand where things are now and how to move on. So
Right.
I would really love you to talk about that for a bit.
Yeah. So my mom was a teacher,
Okay.
and like I said, when I was first working for the university, I was pursuing an advanced degree in liberal arts. My thought was that I would eventually become a teacher. I love to share knowledge. I love to impart new knowledge to people. And so to me, the books and talks that I've given over the years, and even one of the first things I ever published on the web, which was an interactive tutorial on HTML, those are all rooted in teaching, right? I don't write this because, because I want to have a huge pile of paper or
Yeah.
a huge PDF or whatever
Yeah.
with my name on it. I write this because I want people to be able to use CSS, and I want them to
Yeah.
understand how to use CSS, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
If I just wanted to tell people the property names and values, I could just put out a reference, which would be thinner. It would not be tiny, but it would be smaller.
Yeah.
It would just be, here's a property, here's a short paragraph on what it's supposed to be about, right? And then here are each of the values, and maybe each of them gets a sentence or two as to what they're supposed to do, which there's certainly room for that in this world, that it can be useful if you kind of are familiar with things, but you don't necessarily remember all of the values of a given property. Having that kind of a reference is really useful. that's what a lot of us use Mozilla Developer Network for, MDN.
Yeah.
Is,
Yeah.
you know, I want to animate a thing, and I remember the animation property, but I don't remember the names of all the sub-properties, and I don't remember exactly how the values of animation direction go and what all the options are. I'll go to MDN and look them up, right? Like,
Yep.
I've used them before, I don't remember the exact like
Exactly.
wording or whatever. But this, ideally, and this is why actually my co-author Estelle and I, starting with the 4th edition, Estelle joined me as a co-author, because this is almost 1,200 pages.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's almost 600 pieces of paper.
Yeah.
That's a lot for 2 people to do, let alone 1. So it's been really great having Estelle on board, because she is also a teacher in sort of instinct. She works now for Open Web Docs, which actually maintains MDN, and a lot of what she writes is, how to use, the explanations that are on MDN. Many of those are her either writing or editing. So
That's really nice.
yeah, this is why I wrote the book. I mean, in part, it's the like Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. The when he's talking to his father, he's like, "Can't you remember?" And his father says, "I wrote it down so I wouldn't have to remember." To some extent, that's what this is.
Yeah.
Right. MDN is the same kind of thing. Somebody wrote it down so I don't have to necessarily remember every single little nuance. I can go look it up, and I do occasionally. I will pull this out. If I'm doing something that I haven't done in a long time.
Yeah.
If I'm working on background clipping, if I'm doing something with background clipping, which is what I just opened to here, I might pull it out and be like, let me just refresh myself on how this works.
Yeah.
And I should say, for anyone who has seen the book, like, there's one of the figures. There are close to 1,000 figures in this book, and I think, with the exception of 3 of them, they are all captured. They're screenshots. They're high-resolution screenshots out of a browser. So that figure that I was just showing, that has all the various kinds of background clipping and background origins, is literally, I pulled it up in Firefox, and I created a page to do that, pulled it up in Firefox, took a high-resolution screenshot using their command tool thing, and sent it to O'Reilly, and then also put them all on GitHub. So on GitHub pages, there's both the 4th edition and the 5th edition did this, where there's a GitHub pages site and also a repository where you can go and see all, like I say, all but I think 2 or 3. Like, there's, again, with the history in the first chapter, I know there's a screenshot of an interface from Internet Explorer 5 for the Macintosh in either 1999 or 2002. That's not rendered in the browser. It's just a screenshot. So that's not in the GitHub repository. I suppose I could just throw the screenshot in there and be like, here's the screenshot. But anyway.
That's really cool. That's really cool.
That's why it's written, is to teach, to spread the word, to help people understand. And I've heard from a lot of people over the years who've said, I was using CSS, but I didn't really understand it until I read yours in Estelle's book, or I saw this talk. I didn't really understand CSS Grid until I saw a talk. And that not the only one. There are plenty of people who've written CSS books and given CSS talks. I'm sure there are many people who have come up to Leah Veru and said, I absolutely did not realize what CSS was capable of before I saw your talk, because she's given some amazing talks over the years. But
true.
Estelle, for that matter, Estelle has done CSS training, and same kind of deal. Anyway,
that's really cool. So, I mean, obviously, it now looks, working with the history again, right? I would say your history, it now looks like spirit of teaching, right, has been in effect throughout the years that right now it has gotten to this point where we have this book, right? And I would actually say that it's, apart from just using the book as a reference, it's something that I would actually recommend to anyone, well, intermediate developers actually, to go through at least once. If you can actually go through once, because that would help you to realize some things that you don't see on a day-to-day basis, right? And just having that knowledge that this exists sometimes is enough. It actually is. I know several times I have written some code and my colleagues will look at it and it's like, okay, what does this do? And I'm like, I read about it, and just explaining to them, they see that, oh, okay, this is possible, and then they get on with it and use it. So the same way, reading the book would just give you that insight on what is actually possible, and then it actually help a lot.
Yeah, that's always the goal, is to open up the vistas
of
what's possible.